My task now is to introduce to the podium our Minister of State, Honorable Joseph Harmon, someone who's been in the news almost daily. He needs no introduction. He's an individual who has a minister who has said he was going to put his 50% increase in salary towards the cause of the poor and the oppressed. And he has been doing so regularly. And so I introduce Minister Harmon to the podium.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Bar Jagdeo, Leader of the Opposition. Honorable Komal Chan, Member of Parliament and President of the Guyana Agriculture and General Workers Union. Mr. Jerry Dias, the head of the Mr. Jerry Dias of Unifor, Canada. Mr. Calvin Heath London of the Special Purposes Unit. Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen of the Diplomatic Corps, other members of Parliament, special invitees, ladies and gentlemen. This morning I am extremely pleased to speak at this conference as a representative of the government. I know there was some talk that I might not be here, and in fact some letters circulating about my not being here. But I gave a commitment to Komal when the union wrote me that I will come and I will speak. And I believe that it is only right that at a conference like this, that the government's view is put on the table. Irrespective of how we see it, it is important that that view be put on the table. Unlike Mr. Dias, who has a family that grew up on the sugar estates, I grew up on a sugar estate. I grew up at Poudroin, which is on the Vorsail Sugar Estate, which is one of the estates that was closed many years ago. I benefited from that community, from the services that were provided by the sugar estate, the medical center, the community facilities of the Vorsail's estate, playing boys club, youth club cricket and so on the sugar estates. All of these were social services which were provided by the sugar estate and continue to be provided by sugar estates. Unfortunately, Vorsail was closed many years ago, but the community continued to survive. Mr. Chairman, as I said, I'm very pleased to be here, and I would not want to delay this conference too much in polemics, but let me get straight to the point, because I believe it is just about one day, and the time is very short. I've been given 20 minutes to speak. I have some notes that can make me speak for about an hour and a half, but I will leave that to the Leader of the Opposition. I will keep my 20 minutes speaking. Mr. Chairman, Gao, I must, on behalf of His Excellency President Granger and the Cabinet, congratulate the Union for organizing this important event. It is important that we put issues on the table as a nation. And this is why, as I said, I will be here, because I believe we as a nation, we need to put issues on the table and address them frontally. And so today I come to put the government's position on the table with respect to the sugar industry and with respect to the levels of consultation. I've seen a couple of letters in the media concerning the government's position on sugar. I've heard Mr. Komal Chan this morning himself on the government's position on sugar that is not clear and so on, but I trust that in my very short presentation, I will posit that the government's position has been extremely clear from the start when we came into office. Mr. Chairman, the theme for today's conference is sugar too big to fail. The phrase too big to fail means, or may be applied to an entity or business that is so important that its principals must take measures to prevent it from going bankrupt or out of existence. I trust that this is what the framers of the theme had in mind when they decided to apply this phrase to today's conference. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any entity in Guyana that suits this definition, it is Gaisuco, and by extension, the sugar industry. Mr. Chairman, in 2015, when the APNU AFC government acceded to office, we found Gaisuco with a debt of $82 billion. A US $82 million of Gaisuco's reserves invested in the sugar estate, in the Skelton Sugar Estate, and $112 million US in loans committed to its extension and development. This project failed to achieve its most basic objectives, was operationally inefficient, and in the process of its implementation, created a drag on the other sections of the sugar industry. This, coupled with high levels of inefficiency across the rest of the industry, with huge declines in both cane yield and factory recovery, resulted in severe financial difficulties. In fact, the industry only having to survive because of massive injections of subsidies, some $32 billion from 2015 to date. Being faced with these realities, which we inherited as a government, we made a decision that this important national institution and the largest single employer in Guyana, we needed to take a closer look at it and a careful consideration and a carefully considered policy to ensure its survival and a return to viability. This was clear to us because besides the reports, writings, political back and forth, statistics, numbers, and technical arguments, we were dealing with lives, real human situations that translated into day-to-day bread and butter issues. We therefore took the prudent course of action to appoint a commission of inquiry into the Guyana Sugar Corporation in July of 2015 to make recommendations on charting the way forward and to returning the industry to financial viability. All of this was undergirded by a daunting international political economic reality in which after 2009, Guyana was forced to sell its sugar on the world market at prices that were lower than the cost of production. In addition, Guyana's main market for sugar, the European Union, on September 30th, 2017, abolished the quota system, effectively eliminating our last guaranteed market for sugar. In the midst of these inescapable challenges, Mr. Chairman, we approved the appointment of 10 competent persons on the issues of sugar under the chairmanship of Mr. Vibert Parvatan. This commission spent months investigating, consulting, and conversing with the widest cross-section of the Guyanese community, both local and overseas, who were knowledgeable about sugar. The trade unions, namely GAU, NASI, and the Ghana Labor Union, the Cane Farmers Association, individual cane farmers, executives of Gaisuco, managers, department heads, and other categories of workers from all sugar estates, representatives of the local business community, international organizations, accountants, economists, engineers, agronomists, consultants, and entrepreneurs, research staff of the Ministry of Agriculture also. The Commission, after having met for all this time, came up with certain recommendations. And some of the key recommendations made by that Commission were that the corporation should be privatized within 3 years, that a serious evaluation of all diversification options be conducted to avoid total reliance on sugar for Gaisuco's revenues. An evaluation on the options for Gaisuco should be done to amalgamate the Wales and Ifat estates and assign all their cane to the Ifat factory, which was operating at 50% capacity. The corporation should divest itself of the Skeldon estate. The estates of Albion and Rosal are to be amalgamated, and the factory at Rosal is to be closed. The report also highlighted that 60% of Gaisuco's drainage and irrigation infrastructure was in a dilapidated condition. So, Mr. Chairman, these were the results, the findings of a commission of inquiry done after all of these levels of consultation. This report, after it was completed, was widely circulated to the unions that are involved, to the political opposition, and to many other persons across this country. It was laid in the National Assembly, and of course it is still to be debated, but it's laid in the National Assembly. I know that that's a sore point with some of my colleagues in the National Assembly. But Mr. Chairman, the implementation of these recommendations was not something which we did automatically. The government asked Gaisuco, after the Commission of Inquiry made those recommendations, to come up with a plan of action based on these recommendations as to how we will deal with these issues. After many days backward and forward, in fact many weeks, Gaisuco came up with a plan of action, how they will deal with these issues. The plan was aggressively interrogated by the cabinet, and eventually a document was put out. That document itself became the basis of the government's position, which was laid on the table with the unions, with the political opposition, with the representatives of the estates. And I see here a document as part of the conference material that was put out by GAU. This was in fact GAU's response to the government's position at that conference. Started in December of 2016, and I see this one is dated February of 2017. But that was an important conference. That was what we call sitting at the table. Put your issues on the table and let us discuss it. GAU put their issue on the table. NASTI, in fact, said that they concurred with the position of GAU. The political opposition said they needed to have a study done. They never put anything on the table. So what we had on the table was a position by the government and a position by GAU. The government then looked at these positions put them together, extracted the main issues out of them together, and prepared a state paper, which was laid in the National Assembly. That state paper, Mr. Chairman, spoke to several issues which we have to deal with here. It spoke to the question of what we're going to do with sugar, the future of sugar. What we were going to do about the workers, the need to retain workers at the merged sugar factories. That the government, it said, was cognizant of the invaluable contribution of the sugar industry over the years. And so that paper laid out the steps that were to be taken in this regard. Apart, as I said, apart from what GAU was put on the table, this document, there's nothing else coming from anybody else, other than letters in the newspaper. Mr. Chairman, I want to posit that if we are to advance as a nation, we have to put our issues on the table and get it interrogated. We cannot wait on a conference or whatever form of conference it is, or a letter to the letter to the editor, to put our issues there. Study the issues and put it on, let us agree, let us discuss that. And I believe that this has always been the focus of the government, that we have to discuss these issues. Sugar is not something we take lightly. The issue of the condition of our workers, of sugar workers, is not something we take very lightly. And so when the issue of severance came up, we invited the union again to consultation, GAU and NASI to consultations in 2018 on the question of severance and what were some of the issues as it related to the workers. Again at the table, sitting with the cabinet in the cabinet room, and GAU and NASI made their positions very clear. I must say at every point along the way that there has been aggressive representation on behalf of the workers by the union. And not only the unions were there, the representatives from the factories, the estates were also present. And they made their positions clear as well. So, Mr. Chairman, whatever shape or form we arrive at has always been, consultation has always been the bedrock of what we do as a government. And so, Mr. Chairman, in addition to these consultations, and arising out of some of the foundations of the state paper, a special purposes unit for sugar was established with some very clear guidelines as to what is to be done about divestment, what is to be done about sugar lands, and what is to be done about the valuation of these assets, and so on going forward. Additionally, it was made clear by His Excellency the President in a statement which he made as recent as Friday last, that the estates, the lands of the estate, or what he called the family jewels, were not going to be sold off for nothing. That there has to be a clear, transparent process by which these things will be done. So that after a valuation by PricewaterhouseCoopers, that there has to be a system of dealing with these lands. And I want to quote from His Excellency's presentation or statement last Friday. He said, and I quote, "Gaisuco is important to us. We have said that we are not shutting down the sugar industry. It is being reformed, and we are bent on maintaining larger estates in East Berbice, in West Berbice, and West Demerara. We hope to produce between 147,000 to 150,000 tons of sugar. We're aiming at producing those volumes of sugar, and we are aiming at maintaining a working population of about 10,000. The corporation has been placed under a new CEO, and we are selecting a board of directors, the members of which will be more knowledgeable in sugar production. There has been a tendency or a temptation in the past to put persons who might be socially prominent. But this is a business. This is an international industry. We have to compete with other sugar producers, efficient sugar producers in Mauritius, in India, in Vietnam, and around the world. And we need to have a serious board and a serious CEO. And we are working towards having an industry which could profitably produce about 150 tons of sugar annually. We'll make sure that the lands which are being taken out of sugar are placed to the benefit of the people of Guyana as a whole. Now, several anomalies and several contradictions may emerge. For example, the Ministry of Agriculture may need some lands in order to settle sugar workers, and this must be a priority, who are interested in settling. The Ministry of Public Infrastructure would need some lands in terms of the highways and bridges. Ministry of Communities will need some lands in terms of housing, and other ministries may also need land. And private citizens and companies may also need lands. So that in addition to the Special Purposes Unit, there's going to be a State Land Sales Committee. And that is meant to reconcile the differences among these entities. And at the same time, be able to ensure that these lands are sold at a profit that will go back into the industry and into sugar. So there's a future for sugar, a very clear future. And we want to see the sugar industry survive. A more compact, better managed sugar industry. End of quote. These were the words of His Excellency the President last Friday. This is the government's view, Mr. Chairman, on the future of the sugar industry. We are of this view that the industry can survive. And we wish to posit here that there is a distinct clarity on the way that the government has dealt with and is dealing with the future of the sugar industry. We are committed to ensuring that this industry survives. Mr. Chairman, with those two remarks, I want to thank you for providing me with this opportunity to clarify government's position and to ensure that the conference at least gets another view, and that the government under President Granger, the entire cabinet, that we want to wish this conference here a success and to commit to working, to continue working with the union and all stakeholders to ensure that this sugar industry survives and that the lives and livelihood of those workers who continue to be in the industries and those who will be employed when the industry is divested in a certain way, that we will continue to ensure that the livelihood of Guyanese, the Guyanese worker, is our paramount consideration. I thank you very much.